On this Monday night, an Indigenous family's anger and anguish. Colten Boushie's mother vindicated after being vilified by the RCMP.
I did not deserve to be treated the way I was treated.
The next chapter for the two Michaels.
Our focus must remain on finding a way to bring them home.
As another secret trial in China ends without a verdict. Fire and floods, the spew of lava 800 years in the making, and a disaster of the century down under. Plus astronomical achievement.
This was my dream.
The helicopter making history in space, and the Canadian who broke barriers to help make it happen.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The grieving mother of a young Indigenous man killed nearly 5 years ago had her heartbreak compounded by the way she was treated following Colten Boushie's death. A civilian watchdog found RCMP officers behaved in a discriminatory manner the night they came to deliver the news. Debbie Baptiste says she's fighting to spare other Indigenous families the injustice she had to suffer.
It was pure torture. Felt like we were swept under the carpet. We were never going to get justice. When were we going to be heard? That's how it felt. Felt like I was forever fighting a battle that could never be won.
It was a case that sparked outrage across the country. Global's Ryan Kessler joins us from Saskatoon with more on the reaction to the review. Ryan?
Robin, Colten Boushie's mother says her family was not going to stop fighting for justice. And according to the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission, she deserved better treatment than what she received from police. The RCMP watchdog's findings represent long-awaited acknowledgement of what Debbie Baptiste endured hours after her son's death.
If Colten could hear me now, he'd be proud that we continued fighting and we never gave up.
The Civilian Review and Complaints Commission for the RCMP determined Baptiste was discriminated against when officers told her about Boushie's death. The report determined police told her to get it together and smelled her breath.
You swarm her house, you search her house, you call her a drunk, and you call her a liar.
Baptiste's lawyers say police showed the family of the accused more compassion than the victim's family.
There's a big difference, and that is systemic racism.
The commission highlighted investigative shortcomings, like an SUV being exposed to significant rainfall washing away Boushie's blood. An RCMP news release disproportionately focused on a theft investigation connected to Boushie's friends, despite no evidence of Boushie attempting to steal anything.
This case is not unique to Indigenous people, to Indigenous families. Indigenous people are treated like this all the time by the current justice system, by the RCMP.
In a statement, Saskatchewan RCMP said the force is committed to implementing all recommendations, and this report addresses many unanswered questions about officer conduct, saying it is our hope that the report and the steps we have taken to implement the recommendations reinforces our commitment to transparency and accountability to the people we serve. Lawyers for Boushie's mother are now calling on Saskatchewan justice officials to investigate hateful racist remarks made on social media. The lawyers saying that a public shaming is not adequate punishment. Robin?
Ryan Kessler in Saskatoon. Thanks, Ryan. Ray Novak, Prime Minister Stephen Harper's former chief of staff, is suggesting that Canada's former defence chief, General Jonathan Vance, was not truthful when asked about allegations of sexual misconduct prior to his appointment. Novak told the House of Commons Defence Committee today that Harper met with Vance in March 2015 to ask about Vance's alleged inappropriate relationship with a subordinate while serving in Italy. Novak says Vance told Harper he was relieved the matter had been reviewed and was behind him, and that Harper also asked Vance if there was anything else he should know about. Novak also referenced Global News' exclusive interview with Major Kelly Brennan, who alleges she was involved in a long-standing inappropriate relationship with Vance.
I think it's clear that she made extremely serious allegations. And if they are true, and I have no reason to doubt her, that means the general was not truthful with the Prime Minister in their meeting.
Novak says the Conservative government was made aware in July 2015 of a rumor that Vance had an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate while at CFB Gagetown. Novak says an investigation did not find any further information that warranted canceling Vance's appointment. Vance denies the allegations. Another senior Canadian Forces member has resigned from the military. Lieutenant General Christopher Coates admitted to having an affair with a civilian while he served as the deputy commander of NORAD at its headquarters in Colorado. Coates returned to Canada last year to become the commander of the Canadian Joint Operations Command. He says the decision to step aside is his. In a message obtained by the Canadian press, Coates said, "After much reflection, I made this decision for my own personal reasons, including what I believe would be in the best interests of the Canadian Armed Forces." The Department of National Defence says Coates wasn't in violation of any rules because the civilian was not under his command. The much-anticipated trial of Michael Kovrig in Beijing has ended with no verdict. Chinese officials say that will come at a later date. It's the same outcome we saw with Michael Spavor last week. Both Canadians have been detained in China for more than 2 years on spying charges. Canadian diplomats were refused entry to both hearings despite repeated calls for transparency. And as Abigail Bimman reports, the federal government says it is deeply troubled by the situation.
Netherlands, United Kingdom.
About 24 countries stood outside a Beijing courthouse supporting Michael Kovrig and Canada.
The United States is deeply alarmed that Chinese authorities are now commencing a trial.
Hopefully we'll be able to see him this morning and get access to the court.
That didn't happen. Just like at Michael Spavor's trial, China blocked access over so-called state secrets. And a foreign ministry spokesperson blasted Canada and all the allies for showing up, claiming interference with China's judicial sovereignty.
We will continue to work closely with our international partners to pursue accountability and transparency.
I have no words to explain how remarkable he has been, how calm he has been, how stable and focused he has been.
Michael Kovrig's wife didn't sleep last night, or much the past few days. China's conviction rate tops 99%, and it's hard to try and prepare for a guilty verdict.
Our focus must remain on finding a solution, on finding a way to bring them home. And I think that solution all along has been a diplomatic one. And now more than ever, we simply need to get on with it. It has been way too long.
This case is not the case of the two Michaels. This case is the 3 M's. And until a solution to the Meng Wanzhou detention is also part of a package, we're going to be having more and continued painful moments like this.
In Beijing, a long day turned to night. Canada's representative was still outside the courthouse with no new information from the other side of the wall.
We'll be following up with them to register our protest of not having had access to the trial, and we'll be demanding to see Michael Kovrig very soon.
As two families, along with the world, await 2 verdicts. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
Canada is imposing sanctions on 4 Chinese officials over horrific human rights violations against minority Muslims in that country. The sanctions involve freezing assets and a travel ban. The move is a coordinated effort with the U.S., Britain, and the European Union. The countries are taking a stand over mounting evidence of mistreatment and abuse of China's weaker population. Our chief political correspondent, David Akin, joins us now. David, what is the significance of these sanctions, and where do they fit in the big picture of Canada-China relations?
Well, this is just the sort of thing, Robin, that Canada has actually been advocating: broad, coordinated, international action to address China's bad behavior. In this case, as you mentioned, the genocide that China is committing against millions of Muslim Uyghurs in northwest China. I'm told these sanctions have been in the works for some time, and are not a response to the trials of the two Michaels or really anything else that happened in the last week. But what has made this coordinated action possible is the new approach from the Biden administration. Having the United States aligned diplomatically with Canada, the EU, and Australia is very powerful, diplomatic sources are telling me. These sanctions have already provoked an angry denunciation by China, and China has retaliated with its own sanctions against several Europeans. I'm told there may be some sanctions against some Canadians. Robin?
But David, given all that's happened in the last week on the two Michaels file, their trials, the U.S.-China meetings in Alaska, is Canada any closer to getting them home?
Diplomatic sources again tell me they believe that, if anything, the outlook for the two Michaels today is likely darker than it was this time last week. One thing, the Chinese feel the Americans insulted them in Alaska, and if the Americans now say they want the two Michaels to be treated as if they were American citizens, fine, the Chinese say they'll keep them in jail a little longer. And while the Canadian side believes it is a definite plus to have the U.S. weighing in on behalf of the two Michaels, it also means the two Michaels are now players or chips in an ever-widening geopolitical contest between the U.S. and China, and that could complicate Canadian efforts to see the two Michaels freed. Robin?
David Akin in Ottawa, thanks so much for your insight. There are more vaccines coming. It's the biggest week yet for shipments. More than 2 million vaccine doses are set to arrive from Pfizer, BioNTech and Moderna. Plus 1.5 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine are expected from the U.S. by the end of the month. Vaccination programs across the country are expanding. Ontario residents 75 and older can now book an appointment. In Montreal, people 60 and over are now eligible. And Montrealers can now receive their vaccines at a pharmacy. Eventually, 1,500 locations across Quebec will take part. As supply ramps up, about 125,000 shots will be administered in pharmacies each week. Alberta will delay its reopening plans as cases of COVID-19 rise. The province is seeing exponential growth with the B.1.1.7 variant first discovered in the UK. As Heather Yerkes-West explains, despite facing pressure to ease restrictions, Jason Kenney's government says it's too risky right now.
Every student at this Calgary high school is now once again back to learning from home after an outbreak of COVID-19 prompted officials to shut the school down.
I think right now the numbers are making it very clear that the virus is growing in the community. The variants in particular are growing at an extremely rapid rate.
Province-wide, the number of active cases has jumped by 40% in the last month, with the bulk of those new infections coming in the last 7 days. The growth being fueled by the B.1.1.7 variant. The 7-day average number of new infections is now doubling by the week.
We're very concerned about what's happening. We've been saying for a while that with the new variant increasing throughout Alberta, that there was a very good possibility of the third wave, and it looks like that's what we're seeing.
Alberta's government has been facing tremendous pressure to ease restrictions. At least 2 United Conservative Caucus members took to social media Monday, urging the province to proceed to step 3 of reopening. But Alberta's health minister says making that move comes with too much risk.
Alberta now sits at 280 COVID hospitalizations, which is a rise of 16 from a week ago. And this is a problem and a warning sign that we must take seriously.
More than 80% of Alberta COVID patients in ICU right now are under 65 years old. Under the province's reopening framework, the next step would include easing restrictions on things like indoor gatherings, bingo halls, and adult team sports. But Tyler Shandro says for now, those measures will have to wait.
There will be no easing of any restrictions at this time. This is the safe move. It's the smart move to make for our province right now, and it's absolutely necessary to help us avoid a third wave that would take more lives and once again put more pressure on the hospital system.
It's disappointing news for businesses hoping to reopen again, but with COVID cases surging, Dr. James Talbot agrees it's the right move to make.
Our fear, which is based in reality, is that we're going to see the second wave on steroids.
Heather Yerkes-West, Global News, Calgary.
Tonight's NHL game between the Edmonton Oilers and the Montreal Canadiens has been postponed because of COVID fears. 2 Montreal players are now on the league's COVID protocol list. They may not have the virus, but may have come in contact with someone who does. It's the first time a matchup in the league's North Division has been called off because of COVID. The spring break hangover in Miami Beach. Coming up, the curfew to control the crowds. Confidence in the AstraZeneca vaccine may be restored with new trial data out of the U.S. showing it is safe and effective. A study completed by AstraZeneca shows the 2-shot vaccine developed by Oxford University is 79% effective against COVID-19. It also offered strong protection for older people who weren't well represented in earlier studies. This study involved more than 30,000 participants, and scientists found there was no increased risk of clots. That was a concern for several European countries, which temporarily suspended the use of the vaccine. The U.S. is bracing for what could be a 4th wave of COVID-19 infections. Case numbers are climbing, and there are fears more contagious variants will spread rapidly as millions of spring break travelers head home from hotspots like Florida. Jackson Prosco reports.
The party is over in Miami Beach, where the mayor declared a state of emergency after large maskless groups swarmed city streets. At one point, a police SWAT team tried to break up the crowds. A nightly 8 p.m. curfew is now in effect until the end of spring break.
It's a little ridiculous considering that, we are paying to stay on the hotels on the Strip and we can't even have dinner.
Many came here looking for a vacation from the virus, drawn in by Florida's lax restrictions.
Governor Ron DeSantis making it a free state, no mask. We can come and have some fun.
But COVID hasn't taken time off. Florida is the U.S. hotspot for cases of the more contagious variant first detected in the UK. The young people out partying are less likely to have been vaccinated.
The likelihood of these individuals contracting and spreading the virus amongst themselves is relatively high. When they then go back to their home states, they are introducing the virus in.
Cases are already on the rise in at least 21 states, including Michigan, which is reporting more than a 50% increase in cases in just the last week.
We are at a critical point in this pandemic, a fork in the road.
It's not just virus variants from afar. Similar homegrown mutations have sprung up in California and New York and are gaining steam.
We must act now, and I am worried that if we don't take the right actions now, we will have another avoidable surge.
And so the race is on to vaccinate. 1 in 4 Americans has now received at least their first dose. 2 months from now, there will be enough available for everyone in the country. Until then, the virus will continue to pose a risk, even to those who ignore it. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
Still ahead, feel the fire in Iceland, the eruption centuries in the making. The worst flooding in 60 years has sparked a natural disaster in Australia. About 4 months of rain have fallen in a matter of days. At least 18,000 people have been forced to flee. From the air, New South Wales looks like the ocean swallowed it up. There's water as far as the eye can see. The situation is staggering, stretching from Sydney to Brisbane. Towns and suburbs are already completely cut off, and more rain is in the forecast. A huge fire has ripped through a Rohingya refugee camp in Bangladesh, killing at least 3 people, but it's feared more could be dead. The flames erupted in the early morning and took more than 4 hours to bring under control. The cause is under investigation. This area of Bangladesh grew into the world's largest refugee camp in 2017 after more than 700,000 Rohingya Muslims escaped a violent crackdown in neighboring Myanmar. Up next, meet the Canadian woman hoping to make aviation history on the Red Planet. Take a look at this spectacular view of an erupting volcano in Iceland. The dramatic drone footage shows lava spewing and flowing into rivers. Experts estimate about 300,000 cubic meters of lava have poured out so far. Thousands of people are flocking to the site for a rare up-close look. No volcanic ash has been detected, but there are high levels of volcanic gases. The eruption, which began Friday, is the first in the area in more than 800 years. NASA's Perseverance rover is preparing to show off more of its moves on Mars. Within the rover's belly is the Ingenuity helicopter, which NASA considers a high-risk, high-reward technology. It will become the first man-made device to fly on another planet during its maiden flight next month. Tonight, Mike Drolet speaks to the Canadian engineer turned rocket star, playing a crucial role in the mission.
History is filled with the impossible. In 1903, the Wright brothers changed the world. And in a few weeks, NASA will try and change space exploration with its own moment of flight on Mars, 246 million kilometers from Kitty Hawk, North Carolina.
I think so. I mean, we're flying on another planet. Come on. Like, you know, it's kind of crazy because, you know, we've only been flying on Earth for about 100 years, and now we're saying we're going to go to another planet where gravity is different.
Ingenuity is its name, and it's apropos. NASA had to design a helicopter that could fly in atmosphere 99% thinner than on Earth and survive minus 90 degrees Celsius temperatures at night. After years of testing, all that's left is to prove it can fly on the red planet. What a journey to get to this point for Ingenuity and systems engineer Farah Alibay.
I think the best description is meandering for my path, and eventually I made it, and I made it where I wanted to be, mostly because this was my dream.
And now the Montreal-born, Cambridge-educated granddaughter of immigrants who fled civil war in Madagascar has become one of the new faces of NASA.
But I think what we forget to talk about is all the failures along the way, all the sacrifices that had to happen, all of the wrong turns, all the detours that were taken.
Life certainly wasn't easy for Alibay, growing up as a minority in Quebec, as a francophone in England, and overcoming NASA's lack of diversity. She applied to the agency over 50 times, eventually getting noticed by the right people.
Hi, Sophie.
It's why she relishes the opportunity to speak with young girls.
How long does the helicopter fly?
So for our first flight, we're not going to go very far. We're actually just hopping up and down. And so we're going to fly about 40 seconds to 1 minute, right? So the same way as like you don't learn to run first, you walk first or crawl. That's what we're doing.
Alibay is a genius at this stuff, but it's the way she speaks to an 8-year-old that makes her a rocket star. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
That's a great story. And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is Pichu Falls, Manitoba. Please keep sending your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.